At my rehearsal dinner, my fiancée's family played a slideshow of all her wealthy ex-boyfriends as a prank. My fiancée just laughed. I smiled through the pain, playing the part of the fool. They had no idea I spent that entire night digging into their secrets. The next day, at our wedding, when the priest asked if anyone objected, I raised my hand. Before we get to that humiliating dinner, I have a quick question. What city are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe for more stories every day. Okay, let's head to that rehearsal dinner. The private dining room at the Regis Club was the kind of place designed to make a man like me feel small. The air was thick with the scent of old money, expensive perfume, and a quiet, suffocating snobbery. I sat at the long, candlelit table, a ghost in a well-fitting but unremarkable suit, surrounded by my fiancée Isabella's family. They were a clan of old-money aristocrats who saw me, a self-made owner of a successful construction company, as a kind of fascinating but ultimately inferior specimen. New money. I loved Isabella. Or at least, I loved the woman I thought she was. For a year, she had been a ray of light in my life. But in the presence of her family, she seemed to shrink, her warm personality fading into a cool, polite deference that always left me feeling like an outsider. Her parents, her cousins, and especially her older brother Julian treated me with a kind of polite, smiling condescension that was far more insulting than any open hostility. Tonight was our rehearsal dinner, the night before I was to officially join their perfect, pedigreed world. And they had, I was about to discover, prepared a special initiation for me. It was Julian, Isabella's arrogant, silver-tongued brother, who stood up to give the toast. "To my dear sister, Isabella," he began, raising his glass, a smug, predatory smile on his face, "and to her lucky fiancé, Jacob. As we welcome Jacob into our family, I thought it would be fun to take a little trip down memory lane to celebrate the winding path that led my sister to this very moment." He clicked a button on a remote, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. My heart sank. The first slide appeared. It was a beautiful, sun-drenched photo of Isabella, laughing on the deck of a massive yacht, her arm around a handsome, ridiculously tanned man. The caption read, "Javier, the Spanish polo champion, summer 2018. A wave of polite, appreciative laughter went through the room. I felt my face flush. The next slide. Isabella in a glittering evening gown at a gala in Paris on the arm of another impossibly handsome man. Sebastian, the Swiss banking heir, winter 2019. More laughter, this time a little louder. I risked a glance at Isabella. She was just smiling, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. The slideshow continued. A tech CEO from Silicon Valley, a British lord, a famous artist. It was a parade of her past, a curated exhibition of the powerful, wealthy men who had come before me. With each slide, the message became clearer, a brutal, public declaration. This is the world she belongs to. You do not. Then came the final slide. It was a grainy, unflattering photo of me, taken on a fishing trip last year. I was holding up a small, sad-looking trout, squinting into the sun, a goofy grin on my face. The caption underneath, in the same elegant font, simply read, "Jacob, the contractor. Current finalist?" The room exploded in laughter. It was not a kind, gentle laughter. It was a sharp, cruel, braying sound, the sound of a pack of wolves, secure in their own superiority,
mocking a lesser creature.
And in that moment, the only thing in the world that mattered was the reaction of the woman beside me. I turned to Isabella, my heart breaking, expecting, praying to see a look of horror on her face, for her to stand up and defend me, to put a stop to this monstrous, humiliating spectacle. But she did not. She just watched me, a small, polite smile on her beautiful lips. And then, as her brother gave her a conspiratorial wink, she let out a high, clear, tinkling laugh of her own, a sound of pure, untroubled amusement. The sound of her laughter was the sound of a knife entering my heart and twisting, hard. It was not just a prank, it was a conspiracy, and she was in on it. A profound, cold clarity washed over me. The love I felt for her, so warm and so real just moments before, turned to ash. I sat there in the midst of their laughter, and I did the only thing I could do. I smiled. A wide, pleasant, and completely empty smile. I played the part of the good-natured fool who could take a joke. They thought they had just put me in my place, that they had won. They thought they had successfully reminded the simple blue-collar contractor that he would always be an outsider. They had no idea that in that single terrible moment of her laughter, my fiancée hadn't just broken my heart. She had just given me a very, very good reason to spend the rest of the night before our wedding, digging into every single dark and dirty secret her perfect, powerful family had ever tried to hide. And I had a feeling I was going to find exactly what I was looking for. I sat through the rest of that excruciating dinner with a smile carved on my face. I laughed along with their cruel, condescending jokes. I listened as my fiancée, Isabella, and her brother Julian told charming, fabricated stories about their idyllic childhood. I played the part of the good-natured, slightly dim-witted fool they all believed me to be. It was the hardest and most necessary performance of my life. My heart, which had shattered into a million pieces the moment I heard her laugh, was now being reassembled piece by painful piece into something cold, hard, and unfamiliar. A weapon. The car ride back to our hotel suite was a masterclass in gaslighting. Isabella snuggled up to me, her hand resting on my thigh. "You're not really mad, are you, Jacob?" she murmured, her voice a sweet, melodious poison. "It was just a silly joke. My brother is just like that. He has a wicked sense of humor. You can't take him so seriously." "Of course not," I said, my own voice a marvel of calm detachment. "It was funny, a real classic." She seemed satisfied with my answer, turning to look out the window at the glittering city lights, completely oblivious to the Arctic wasteland that had just formed in the space between us. She thought she had gotten away with it. She thought I was the same simple, trusting man who had proposed to her 6 months ago. She had no idea that man had died in that dining room, right between the main course and the dessert. The moment we got back to our hotel suite, I told her I had a terrible migraine from the wine and needed to lie down. It was the first lie in a new and final chapter of our relationship. The moment she was asleep, I slipped out of bed, took my laptop, and went into the cold, silent living room of the suite. The prank hadn't just been cruel. It had been too polished, too calculated. It was a message. And the cold, dead look in Isabella's eyes when she had laughed had told me she was not just an observer. She was a co-author. The question was, why? Why would she, on the eve of our wedding, participate in such a profound act of public humiliation against me? The only possible answer was that this wedding, to her, was not about love. It was about something else.
I made the phone call. My friend Frank is a private investigator, the best in the business, a man who can find the cracks in any perfect facade. I had used his firm for due diligence in my construction business for years. "Frank," I whispered into the phone, my back pressed against the cold glass of the hotel window. "It's Jacob. I have an emergency job for you. A top priority overnight money-is-no-object job." "Everything okay, Jake?" His voice was a low, concerned rumble. "No," I said, "but it's about to be. I need a full, deep-dive financial and background check on a man named Julian Prescott, my future brother-in-law. I need it by 7 a.m. tomorrow. I don't care what you have to do." While Frank and his team went to work, I started my own dig. I am a builder. I know that every structure, no matter how beautiful, has a weakness in its foundation. And the foundation of the Prescott family was their carefully curated public image. I went through Julian's social media, a glittering feed of yacht parties, ski trips, and vague, important-sounding business deals. It was a perfect performance of effortless wealth, but it was too perfect. I started cross-referencing the dates of his posts with public records, with news from the financial world. The inconsistencies began to pile up. The startup he had invested in had gone bankrupt. The charity he was on the board of was a shell corporation. It was all smoke and mirrors. At 4:37 a.m., just as the sky was beginning to turn from black to a bruised grayish purple, the email from Frank arrived. The subject line was just 2 words: "You were right." I opened the encrypted file and I read. And with every line, a new, more horrifying layer of the truth was revealed. Julian Prescott was not a successful investor. He was a degenerate gambler and a failed businessman. The report detailed a mountain of debt, not just to casinos and high-end credit card companies, but to a private and very dangerous loan shark. But it was the final part of the report that made the air leave my lungs. Frank had found the smoking gun. It was a copy of a formal loan agreement between Julian and his creditor. The final, massive balloon payment of $250,000 was due on Monday, the day after our wedding. The report also contained a quiet but significant detail about my own wedding plans. The cash gift registry, which I had thought was Isabella's modern, sophisticated idea, was linked directly to a new joint bank account, an account for which she had already granted her brother Julian full signatory access. And there it was, the whole, ugly, and pathetic truth. My entire relationship, my engagement, this entire extravagant wedding, it was all a sham. A last-ditch, desperate business transaction designed to use my hard-earned money, my good name, to pay off her brother's gambling debts and save him from whatever violent consequences were coming his way. She hadn't been laughing with her family at the rehearsal dinner. She had been laughing at her mark, at the fool she was about to fleece. I sat there in the dark, silent hotel room, the first rays of the morning sun creeping over the horizon. It was my wedding day. My heart, which had been broken just hours before, was now a cold, dead, and empty thing. The grief was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a pure, cold, and diamond-hard resolve. I looked at the expensive, perfectly tailored wedding suit hanging on my door. I was supposed to be a groom today, a happy, loving, and slightly foolish husband, marrying the woman of his dreams. I would still play the part. I would walk to that altar. I would smile at my beautiful, treacherous, and utterly doomed bride. They were all expecting a wedding, but I was going to give them a public execution.
The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear, a detail of such profound, cosmic irony that I almost had to laugh. It was the kind of perfect, storybook day that every couple dreams of. For me, it felt like the day of a state execution. My own. I went through the motions in a state of cold, detached automation. I put on the expensive, perfectly tailored tuxedo I had been so proud of just yesterday. It now felt like a costume, the uniform for the final, tragic role I had to play. My best man, my brother, was a whirlwind of cheerful, nervous energy around me, straightening my tie, offering me a celebratory glass of champagne that I refused. He saw my quietness, my stillness, and mistook it for pre-wedding jitters. He had no idea I was not a nervous groom. I was a loaded weapon, my safety off, waiting for the perfect moment to fire. My phone buzzed. It was a text from her, Isabella, my beautiful, treacherous bride. "Can't wait to see you at the altar, my love," it read, followed by a string of heart emojis. "Today is the first day of our forever." A year ago, those words would have made my heart sing. Now they were just evidence. Exhibit A in the case for her profound and monstrous betrayal. I replied with a simple, "You too," and added a single heart of my own. The game, I had decided, would be played until the very last second. As I stood at the altar of the grand, sunlit cathedral, waiting, I felt a strange sense of calm. The church was filled with hundreds of guests, their faces a sea of happy, expectant smiles. On the left side sat my family and friends, their love a warm, genuine presence. On the right sat hers, her father, her mother, and sitting in the front row, his face a mask of smug, triumphant relief, was her brother, Julian. He thought he was safe. He thought his problems were about to be solved. He kept catching my eye and giving me a little conspiratorial wink, as if we were two partners in the same happy crime of marrying his sister. He had no idea how right he was. Then, the organ swelled to a triumphant, deafening crescendo. The massive cathedral doors swung open, and there she was, Isabella. She was a vision, a breathtakingly beautiful angel in a cloud of white silk and lace. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her face a perfect portrait of bridal joy, her eyes locked on mine. And for a single, terrible, heartbreaking moment, the old Jacob, the man who had loved her with every fiber of his being, resurfaced. My heart ached. I wanted so desperately for it all to be a lie, for the PI report to be wrong, for her laughter at the rehearsal dinner to have been a mistake, for the woman walking towards me to be the one I had fallen in love with. But then, as she reached the altar, she looked past me for a split second, her gaze meeting her brother's, and I saw it, a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of a shared, triumphant smile. It was a look of confirmation, a look that said, "We did it. The fool is hooked." And in that moment, the last of my heartbreak burned away, leaving nothing but cold, hard, and righteous ash. The loving groom was gone, and the executioner took his place. The ceremony proceeded. I was a flawless actor. I said my vows, my voice steady, my words a masterpiece of double meaning that only I could understand. "I promise," I said, looking into her beautiful lying eyes, "to give you a life you could never have imagined, and to give your family, especially your brother, exactly what they deserve." She had squeezed my hand, a tear of joy rolling down her cheek. We exchanged rings. We knelt for the blessing. The priest, a kind old man with a gentle smile, finally reached the end.
"And now," he said, his voice beaming as he looked out at the congregation, "if there is anyone here who has any just cause why this man and this woman should not be joined together in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The traditional, polite, and expected silence fell over the cathedral. The guests smiled, ready for the final joyous pronouncement. Isabella turned to me, her eyes shining with a look of pure, triumphant love. She thought she was seconds away from her victory, from securing her brother's salvation and my fortune. I let the silence stretch for 1 second, 2, 3. Then I gently raised my hand. "I'm sorry, Father," I said, my voice not loud but perfectly clear in the vast, silent church. "But there is a just cause." I took a step back from Isabella, creating a small, unbridgeable space between us. And then I looked out at the sea of shocked, confused faces, at my own horrified family, at my bride's family, their faces now a mask of dawning, panicked horror. And I said the words that would bring their entire world crashing down. "I object." My bride stared at me, her beautiful, smiling face, which had been turned up to mine in a look of loving adoration just a moment before, completely crumbled. Her jaw went slack, her eyes widened with a profound, uncomprehending shock. "Jacob," she whispered, her voice a small, broken thing. "What are you doing? This isn't funny. Stop it." Her father, from the front pew, was already on his feet. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed, his face turning a deep, furious red. I held up a single calming hand to the stunned priest. "Forgive me, Father," I said, my voice now amplified by the small microphone on my lapel, a microphone I now realized was my stage. I turned away from my devastated bride and faced our guests. I faced her family. I took a deep breath and began the performance I had been rehearsing in the cold, dark hours before the dawn. "Good afternoon, everyone. I know this is highly unorthodox. Please bear with me." I looked out at the sea of confused, shocked faces. Last night, at our rehearsal dinner, my future brother-in-law, Julian, and the Prescott family played a little prank on me. A very amusing slideshow showcasing my fiancé's impressive romantic history with a series of princes and banking heirs, all meant to remind me of my humble place in their grand world. I paused, letting the memory of the previous night's humiliation settle in the minds of the guests who had been there. "It was all in good fun, of course," I continued, my voice dripping with irony, so thick it was almost a physical thing. "And my beautiful bride, Isabella, she laughed right along with them. It was a joke. I was supposed to be a good sport and laugh too."
I then turned my gaze to Isabella's brother Julian, who was now staring at me, a look of dawning, panicked dread on his face. "But the real joke," I said, my voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious, "was not the slideshow. The real joke I discovered when I couldn't sleep last night was this wedding. The real joke was me." Isabella was now shaking her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Jacob, please stop," she begged. I ignored her. I was speaking to the room now. "You see," I said, my voice the calm, methodical tone of a man explaining a business deal, "I have always been told that my future brother-in-law, Julian, is a brilliant and successful investor, a man of leisure, a man of taste. But it turns out that is not quite the truth. The truth is that Julian is a compulsive gambler. The truth is that Julian has amassed debts totaling over $250,000. A new, more shocked gasp went through the crowd. I saw Julian's father, my would-be father-in-law, lurch to his feet, his face a mask of pure rage. But I continued, my voice relentless. "And the most pressing of those debts," I said, my eyes now finding Julian's, "a particularly large sum owed to some very unsavory creditors, is due for collection tomorrow. A fact which I am sure is a complete and total coincidence." I then, finally, turned to face my bride. I looked into her beautiful, tear-streaked, and treacherous face. "And this wedding," I said, my voice now a low, heartbroken whisper that was nonetheless carried to every corner of the silent cathedral by the microphone, "this beautiful, perfect, and incredibly expensive celebration, it was never a marriage. It was a fundraiser. It was a last-ditch desperate bailout plan.
It was a business transaction, designed by this family to use the generous cash gifts from all of you. I gestured to the stunned guests. And of course, a significant contribution from my own personal funds to pay off Julian's gambling debts and save him from the consequences of his own pathetic, reckless life. And my fiancée, the woman I loved with my entire soul, she wasn't just a reluctant participant. She was the architect of the entire beautiful and fraudulent scheme. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Julian's parents were on their feet, screaming lies, slander. Julian himself looked like he was about to collapse. Isabella was just standing there, sobbing, her beautiful face a ruin of her own making. In the midst of the chaos, I did one last thing. I reached into my pocket and took out the simple, elegant gold wedding band I had been about to place on her finger. I walked to the altar, and I placed it gently on the white lace cloth. "I believe this was for the finalist," I said, my voice for her ears alone. I then turned to the back of the church, my voice once again a clear public announcement. "And for the Prescott family, my lawyer, Mr. Davies, is waiting for you by the main doors. He has a full, detailed copy of the private investigator's report on Julian's finances, as well as a civil suit I am filing against you for fraud and emotional distress. I'm sure you'll find it makes for a fascinating wedding reception." I turned my back on my bride, on her ruined family, and on the smoking wreckage of our wedding. I began to walk, alone, back down that long, magnificent aisle. I had walked into this church a happy, loving, and completely clueless groom. I was walking out a free and much, much wiser man. And I had just given them a wedding present they would be paying for, in every sense of the word, for the rest of their lives. I walked out of that cathedral and into the bright afternoon sun, a free man. The chaos I left behind me was a distant, unimportant symphony. I did not look back. I didn't need to. The image was burned into my mind. Isabella's beautiful, treacherous face crumbling in horrified disbelief. Her brother Julian's, pale with the terror of a man whose safety net had just been cut. And her parents, watching the legacy of their perfect family name being incinerated in real time in front of 200 of their closest friends. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, was indeed waiting by the grand doors, a thin, satisfied smile on his face. He intercepted Isabella's father, who was sputtering, red-faced, trying to salvage the situation. Mr. Davies handed him a copy of the private investigator's report. "My client withdraws all prenuptial settlement offers," Mr. Davies said with a lethal calm, "and he expects your family to cover all costs associated with this fraudulent event. If you fail to do so, this report becomes a public document. Have a good day." My own family met me on the church steps, their faces a mixture of shock, concern, and a reluctant, dawning respect. My brother put his arm around my shoulder. "Are you okay, Jake?" he asked. "I'm better than I was 10 minutes ago," I replied, and for the first time that day, a real, genuine smile touched my lips. The weeks that followed were a social earthquake. The story of the Prescott wedding that wasn't became the most scandalous and delicious legend the city's high society had seen in decades. Their version of the story, the one they desperately tried to spread, was that I was an unstable groom who had a nervous breakdown at the altar. But the truth, as it always does, had a way of seeping out. Mr. Davies' report, while never made public, was strategically leaked to a few key figures, and the real story of the fraud, the gambling debt, and the betrayal spread like wildfire. The Prescott family, an empire built on a foundation of flawless reputation, imploded. Julian, without my money to save him, was forced to declare bankruptcy. His unsavory creditors, I later heard, were not kind. He lost his car, his apartment, and his place in the world he so desperately clung to. He was forced to get a real job for the first time in his life. Isabella, my ex-fiancée, tried to contact me. First came the furious, abusive text messages. Then came the tearful, manipulative voicemails, full of apologies that sounded hollow and self-serving. She wasn't sorry she had deceived me. She was sorry she had been caught. I never responded. I blocked her number and never heard her voice again. My vindication, however, did not come from watching their downfall. It came from a phone call I received about a month later. It was from one of the wedding guests, an older, respected businessman named Mr. Harrison, a man I barely knew. "Jacob," he said, his voice a low, respectful rumble, "I was incredibly impressed by what you did that day. It took a tremendous amount of courage to stand up for your own honor like that. My company is launching a new, massive development project, and we're looking for a lead builder with a reputation for integrity and backbone. I'd like to meet with you to discuss it." That meeting led to the biggest and most prestigious contract of my company's history. My reputation, the one the Prescott family had tried to tarnish, had, in fact, been cemented by my refusal to be their victim. My integrity, the very quality they had mocked, had become my most valuable asset. It's been a year. My life is quieter now, but it is real. My business is thriving, and I learned a painful but priceless lesson. I had walked into that relationship blinded by love, willing to ignore the small red flags, willing to believe in the beautiful facade. The humiliation I suffered at that rehearsal dinner was the cruelest and most valuable gift I have ever received. It opened my eyes. My revenge wasn't the moment I raised my hand in that church. It was my life afterward. It was the success I built, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. It was the peace I found in knowing that I had escaped a lifetime of lies. They had tried to make me the fool in their story, but in the end, I became the author of my own, and I walked away, leaving them behind, trapped in the final, ruined chapter of their own false fairy tale. An absolutely incredible story of a wedding day revenge and standing up for yourself in the most public way possible. What do you think of Jacob's decision to expose everything at the church? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. If you were on the edge of your seat during this intense drama, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more daily stories of shocking karma and revenge. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.